Hello and welcome to a new segment from D6 Damage. This is Page to Battle Mat, where we are going to be talking about the literary origins of monsters and other aspects that have influenced tabletop games like Pathfinder and D&D over the years, and how you can take some of these ideas and bring them to your next tabletop adventure. I'm joined today by D8.
Hi guys, I'm just going to give you a little bit of personal information here so you get a bit of background where we're going here. I am, as of this recording, starting my master's in literature and writing, and I had the privilege to get a class that talked about what is called monster theory in literature, which is, if you don't know what that is, I'm not surprised. I hadn't heard of it either, but it basically is all about how monsters can be read as an influence on social behaviors and whatnot. And so it's very interesting, and we want to do something a little bit different. So this is very experimental, and we really need your feedback to see if this is something you guys like. So please hit a like button if you do. If you don't, then give us notes.
Yeah, and obviously, any comments you want to leave us really help us, will really help shape the vision of what we're going to be doing with Page to Battle Mat. So, like D8 was saying, our mission with this series is to dig more into the origins of some of the monsters that have been made famous in many a D&D game over the years, and look at how they impact the world that they're in. One thing that can happen with monsters is that they can sort of exist in this weird state of isolation. It's like, you go to a village, you rock up to the local, burgomeister, and he's like, oh, we have a cockatrice just perched on yonder mountain. I need a hardy adventurer to go deal with it. And it's like, well, that kind of came out of left field, didn't it? Yeah,
it's like that safe zone problem. So in video games where you enter a new area, and that's the safe zone, and then when you exit the area, suddenly you're in the shit.
Yeah, you're just 5 minutes out of town. It's like, you've got level 60 monsters ready to bite your face off. That's sort of an MMO thing.
But the other thing we noticed, too, is that a lot of the process of making these monsters onto, to put them within the system, loses a lot. And so we thought to ourselves, what could we do in order to try to catch that feel that we get when we read things like Dracula, and add it back into the game, which has, kind of as a consequence of needing to put statistics onto them, it's kind of lost.
Exactly. So that's one of our goals, is to give back some of those elements, or, uncover some of those elements that are along with the monsters, and see how you can implement them into your game, and also to assist with world building and how these creatures fit into the setting. It's like, so you've got a fantasy city that's having problems with slime. Like, why are there ooze creatures in the sewer? How does that all fit together?
And what problems may come from that, and that kind of thing. So we thought we would try something very different, and we'd do this kind of more educational approach to these monsters, to give you kind of the background of the real world background of these monsters, kind of what scholarship and academia has to say on the matter, and then we would kind of speculate on what we could do to kind of merge the two.
And in keeping with the theme of academia, we are using a bit of a rubric for this discussion. D8, why don't you fill us in on that?
Yeah, so there is an author who he's an academic who works in this field named Jeffrey Cohen, and we are actually using a article of his. I think it's actually an introduction to a collection of works called "The 7 Theses of Monster Culture." And I want to give you a little bit of background on these 7 theses so that we all know exactly where we're coming from when we're looking at the monsters we're going to be looking at. And don't worry, I chose Cohen because, 1, it's a very short article, and 2, it's very clear and easy to read. And even on top of that, I'm going to give you kind of the bullet points of it, just so that we're all in the same starting location for this.
And if you would like to read this article yourself, there will be a link in the description.
So I'm going to kind of go from the start. So Cohen is pretty well known for this field of study, and one of the things that he's really arguing in this is that monsters are a cultural creation, and therefore we have to read monsters in a certain way. And so his thesis number one is appropriately, the monster's body is a cultural body. And what he means by that is pretty simple. When a monster is created, it is created in a moment of time with a lot of feelings and place. It's grounded in the time, place, and anxieties that are happening at the moment of its creation. He points out a really interesting thing. The word monstrum actually means that which reveals, or that which warns. So when we're looking at a monster, we're actually looking at a signifier of meaning. And so that's how we're going to have to look at these monsters if we want to approach this kind of concept. So one of the things he's saying is not only, though, is it based in the time, place, and feelings and problems of the time it's created, there is also this carryover to the time, place, and feelings that it's read. So the monster that was created in 1868 is not going to be the same as the monster in 2023. It's going to be similar, but there's going to be differences. And that's because it's going to reflect the same anxieties that we have today that were not necessarily there before.
So obviously this has a lot of rooting in the cultures that give rise to these various monsters. And kind of cards on the table, we are both American. We have lived in this country our entire lives, and we haven't had the experience of living abroad. So our cultural expertise is a little bit limited, or we want to at least be honest about the cultural perspective that we're coming from, and we'll get a little more into that in our roadmap that I'll go over in a little bit.
Going with that, I do want to say I have studied this. That does not mean I am an expert. And anything I get wrong, please feel free to point out. And it's not because I didn't do my research or whatever. It's just or that I'm meaningfully getting it wrong. It is simply because I'm not an expert, and I'm doing my best to convey something that is very, very complicated to us all so that we can have fun with it. All right, on to thesis number 2. The monster always escapes. One thing that he notices, and that we should all notice, is that the monster is never gone for good. There's a reason why, Dracula, which is written 1898, I believe is when it's published, is still with us today. There's new Dracula movies all the time. That monster, no matter how many times he dies, he comes back. And this happens freaking with every monster, it's never gone for good. And part of that is obviously because we like our monsters, but part of it is also because Cohen calls them an intricate matrix of relations. Okay. What he means by that is that monsters are a good canvas. Okay, they have an outline of things, and when we come back to them, we paint them in a different way than they were painted before. It's always influenced and based on the, further back in the line, but it is different. And when it comes back, it will not be exactly the same. So when the monster gets away, it's because we have solved, or it has made its statement on the troubles or anxieties of the time, and when we revisit it, it'll have a new statement on new troubles.
So it's the idea that these monsters have this totem aspect to them, and they can be used to embody new societal fears. And we'll definitely get into that as we talk about how the vision for different monsters changes.
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what I mean. Thesis number 3 is the monster is the harbinger of category crisis, which is a really fun scholarly way of saying that the monster is on the edge of being two different things. They refuse to be categorized as one or the other, right? They exist in this liminality, this space in between one thing and another. They are a third option in a binary choice. That is what makes them monstrous. For example, let's just, quick one, look at undead. There's a binary, life and death. Undead are that third option, right? So that's what we mean by that harbinger of category crisis. They're neither this, they're neither that, yet they're kind of both. Monsters will always fall in that, I'm generalizing, monsters will fall within that kind of slot in between categories. And that is what makes us unsettled with them, because we like to have things in categories.
So that's essentially the source of a lot of the aberrantness. Not in terms of aberrance as the actual category of monsters in D&D, but the fact that these creatures go against natural law, if you want to use that word. They go against the paradigm of undead. Going on with that example is things are alive and then they die, but the idea that something can be dead but still have some of the attributes of life. It can walk around. It can, in some cases, communicate. That's where the horror of the thing is found.
Yes, exactly. And speaking of that aberrant nature, thesis number 4 is the monster dwells at the gates of difference. Which again is a very melodramatic way of saying that when we're talking about monsters and what they represent, we're talking about the other. We are dividing the world into things that are like us and things that are monstrous. And that can be used to satisfy a lot of different anxieties. Whether it be political anxieties or racial or sexual or economic, cultural, all these things, they can be put in terms of monsters because you make the thing that you don't like or the thing that you are scared of into the monster. Or you make a monster that represents that thing. For example, is the depiction of the English King Richard III. For those of you who don't know, and I don't expect you to know, because it's kind of a thing, unless you've been reading Shakespeare or are really into British history, it's really not a big deal. Richard III is described by Thomas More as being, quote, little of stature, ill-featured of limb, crook-backed, and his left shoulder much higher than his right. Okay, he's described as being extremely ugly and monstrous in body, right? Well, we have evidence recently of a painting of Richard III that does kind of show these things, was painted over, and at one time showed him as a normal, shoulders all normal, no crook-backed or deformed limbs or anything like that. And that the picture that is copied most and is kind of influential on all of the pictures of Richard III afterwards was changed to fit the political rhetoric at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we mean. We mean that the other the monster can be used to represent the other, whatever that other is. And that can be a lot of different things. That's what this thesis is about.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to kind of the tribal nature that the human mind has a tendency to fall into. The lizard brain kind of reaction is to assess the threat level of everything around you, because that's what kept humanity alive during all the hard scrabble years of fighting giant, woolly monsters with teeth that are huge and they can bite you in half. So you look at, what is like us and is a known quantity, and what is not like us, different and potentially threatening.
Yeah, exactly. It shows that what is like me, what I see that is like me, I consider normal. And what I see that is not like me is abnormal. It's aberrant. The monster can be used to equate the aberrant with dark things like evil or danger. Alright, thesis number 5. The monster polices the borders of the possible. Pretty fun. What he means by that is a lot simpler than what he said right there. What he means is monsters represent what is not normal. And what that means is they are enforcing a normality. So monsters exist to break a rule, so that we all know a rule is there. The one that he uses here is Lycoan, which we'll get to in one of our later episodes probably, is the first werewolf in history, in Western literature anyway. He becomes a werewolf by failing to give proper hospitality to Zeus. He tries to feed him people instead of, animals. And therefore, what he is doing is we have a monster that is breaking the rules of hospitality and being punished. That reinforces those rules to be something we need to look at.
Zeus left a very bad Yelp review.
Yes. The point being is that when we make something that breaks the rule, it's because we are trying to enforce the fact that the rule exists.
So yeah, that's a subtle form of world building that you can implement where you show whatever your monster is, and explain why the society has a problem with it.
Yes, what it does not conform to, what it breaks, what truth that they believe, and this goes back to our liminality, right? What thing do they believe is a binary that this monster is breaking by being a third option? Alright, Thesis 6. This is a weird one. The fear of the monster is really a kind of desire. This one was very difficult for me to wrap my head around. Excuse me?
I just said concerned.
Yes. It's very difficult, but then you have to think in terms of things like modern monsters, like the vampire. Okay? And I mean truly the modern version of it.
Oh yes,
we linked...
sparkle.
Well, yeah, and the linked kind of sexual freedom with it. So what I mean by that is that there is an allure to monsters, that when they break a rule, a lot of times we sit there and wish we could break that rule.
Well, I think that does really play into the enduring popularity of certain characters, such as, like, the Incredible Hulk, who's, in a lot of ways, a redesign of Frankenstein's monster. A lot of the anti-hero kind of fantasies out there are about being able to be that edgy rule breaker who can...
Yeah, the Punisher. The Punisher is the best example for this. We like the Punisher. The Punisher murders people. Okay? He is breaking that rule. But sometimes we look at it and we go, yes, but he's a hero. Because of, he's doing, what is wrong and for the right reasons or kind of stuff. We have a desire for that. Also think of it in terms of curiosity with things like Jurassic Park. Curiosity is the biggest lure in monster fiction. What we like about them is that they're different and we want to know more. Think also a lot of things like exploration is a huge theme in human history of wanting to know everything.
Yeah, this would this would be like the equal and opposite reaction of the fear of the other is the curiosity.
Yeah, it's part of that need to define everything, that need to categorize everything, right? If it's not currently in your categorization, you need to categorize it. And that draw is something that we experience when we're exploring monsters. They normally have something that, or like think of the succubus, who's an alluring woman that draws men to her, or the siren for that matter, or any of that. There is something there that we need to understand, and that draws us to the monster despite the fact that we understand what will happen. The last thesis, the monster stands at the threshold of becoming, is a really weird one. Basically, what he's saying here is that every time we look at a monster, it's new. And it's new based on what we feel at that time. And every time we make an iteration of a monster, we are adding to the background of that monster and influencing the next version of it. As we change as a society and as a species, our monsters will change with us. They will continue to push the edge of our world as far as we push it as well.
Well, yeah, I think we've definitely seen a lot of that, particularly with the rise of things like the SCP Foundation, internet campfire stories like Slender Man, and a lot of these ideas that have only come up during this, hitherto achieved level of mass communication, and things that speak to very modern senses of like paranoia and those more modern fears.
Yeah, exactly. The idea of creepypasta, something that couldn't possibly exist without the internet, is such a great thing, because before the internet, it didn't. And then with the internet, we have adapted that technology into a new means of creating monsters. So they will change with us.
So let me give you a quick roadmap for Season 1, if you will. You can get the DLC. You get all kinds of extras.
The season pass.
Get the season pass. You get the special page to battle mat currency. You get all kinds of extras you don't get normally. Episode 1, we are going to be covering zombies. Episode 2, we'll delve into werewolves, then vampires, then witches, because that class is just so bad. It's monstrous.
It's monstrous in its own right. You're right.
Demons, and then fae. Obviously, if you have any suggestions for monsters you'd like to see covered, or things that we can do to improve, absolutely leave us feedback in the comments section. And we really want to hear what you think about this new show format we're working on.
Yeah, like we said, this is extremely experimental. We know this is not even remotely like what we normally do, and we desperately need that feedback, even if it's bad feedback, to know what you like. Because if you guys hate this segment, we just won't do it. Like, we get it. But hopefully, after listening to this, you'll at least watch our first episode, because then you'll kind of really get the idea of what we're doing. Once we've gotten into the flow of things, I can't wait to see what things you want us to look at.
Thank you very much for watching this first episode of Page to Battle Mat. Come back next time to see more, and obviously if you want more videos about Pathfinder, classes, guides, and much, much more, check out D6 Damage right here on YouTube, or join the D6 Damage Discord to take your game further.